But as we talked to a number of the companies who we asked if they would present, they said, no, we really do want to tell you what we've been doing in the child safety space. So the task this afternoon, and when I introduce you to those who are kind enough to give up their valuable time to speak to us today, the task is very much to kind of hear what they're saying and to listen to what the key success criteria from their projects has been, and then try to extrapolate that and say, what are the principles that these projects and organisations have developed to ensure that we can take this on board on wider privacy issues for adults as well as children. Those of you who have just possibly joined us this afternoon, welcome especially to you. I know that there's a lot going on in London, so thank you for giving up your time this afternoon. We've had a fascinating morning with a number of very hard-hitting, powerful case studies of adults who have been abused, and I think I speak on all of our behalves to say thank you especially to Graham and to Ren for sharing from your own experiences. And it was right, wasn't it, whilst they'd given their case study, just to sort of be quiet and to sort of let that sink in. And that's been helpful at setting up a backdrop at what can go wrong, and the numbers in America with Jane's presentation of 46,000 people a year that she's been working with who have been cyber-stalked. But now we're going to go into a little bit more detail, and I hope that we can also get a bit more interaction. You know those conferences where it's all from the front and then people go away feeling a little bit empty. This is a conference now where we can start sharing and discussing in the round. And that's why we've put you in tables, that's why we've got the Twitter feeds going, and if some of you are online, have a look at the tweets and the comments that are being posted on Twitter. One last thing as well, just as a way of introduction, is just in your programme you'll see an advert for victim support. Rachel's just come here from victim support. And one of the things we wanted to do at a conference like this is to sort of, in a way, show our own corporate social responsibility and ensure that the proceeds of this event go to victim support and that we give their work high profile. As you heard from Graham's case study this morning, it took 5 years for him to be seen as a victim here in the UK. And when victim support contacted you and gave you support, the feedback that Graham was hearing from them was that actually this is something that's increasingly coming onto the books of victim support. So Rachel, thank you for coming today. Thank you for the work that you do. I hope all of us can continue to support and encourage people to hear about your work. Well, look, over to this afternoon, 4 Dragons Dens, people, individuals. First of all, thank you so much for coming. We've got 3 organisations who really represent 3 different ways and 3 different approaches of tackling child safety at a strategic level, at an industry-based level, and at an individual company level. I'm going to first of all introduce you to Daphne Luchtenberg from Visa, who's been working with CEOP, the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre, and their organisation is represented by Gabrielle Shaw. So both of you, thank you. You're going to come and do a double act in a minute and talk to us and share with us what's happening in a very important initiative called the European Financial Coalition, a coalition made up of law enforcement, companies, NGOs working across Europe to combat the commercial distribution of child abuse images. So we'll hear about their projects, hear about some of the challenges they face, but then the questions to the floor when we finish that section is, what are the lessons that then can be migrated or replicated or transferred to a wider arena? So we're looking forward to that. And I'll stop you after about 10 minutes because we've only got 45 minutes in this session, and we'll sort of say, okay, let's hear some questions and have some feedbacks immediately after Daphne and Gabrielle talk. And then Aidan Pryor. Give us a wave, Aidan. Nice to see you. Aidan's the Director of Education Links at Stelgess, who will share from his extensive experience of developing a safer internet environment for young users, specifically in a mobile internet space. There's a stand called Tibo, and the Tibo product is at the back. And whilst making reference to that, Tibo, Aidan's going to draw back much more around the principles of trying to develop a age-appropriate learning platform called Tibo. And then finally, we're delighted that Simon is here. Simon Sawston is the Public Affairs Manager at ELSPA, the games membership body, to give a perspective from the games industry, especially in what you're doing to protect and safeguard young users. And again, of course, in the light of the Byron report. Everybody's heard of the Byron report? Don't show your hands if you haven't, because Tanya Byron, at the end of the day, is going to come and present some reflections and thoughts about that important piece of work. So enough from me. I'll pop up after Daphne and Gabrielle have given a first announcement. Be thinking of your questions. Either use the Twitter feed and Graham can shout them out, or just put up your hands. Welcome. Let's show our appreciation to these people. Thanks very much, Daphne and Gabrielle.
Thank you. And Gabrielle will join me a little bit later. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an introduction. if you do bear with me, I would just like to spend 2 or 3 minutes on who Visa Europe is, because I think that is an important story to tell, and it puts into context of why we are where we are today, and why we've been able to make so much progress. What many people don't realize is that Visa Europe is actually a not-for-profit association. We're a membership association, and we are focused on making sure that the long-term stability of the global payment system is ensured. So our focus is on making sure that the system works, that we have 99.999% availability and operability all the time. We set the rules and the regulations that actually frame how our members, the banks, issue cards and accept payments. And clearly ensuring that the brand is trusted around the world and actually operates around the world in the way that you all expect it to is our key priority. What we recognize in doing that is that cards actually connect everybody every day, and it means that we're a fabric, very part of the fabric of society. In the UK, 1 in 4 pounds is spent on a Visa card. That's not just a credit card, it's actually a debit card or a prepaid card as well. In fact, most of our business is on debit cards, and the prepaid card portfolio, as a lot of you know, is growing considerably. So a lot of people don't realize that we actually are not American, we're here European, we're not for profit, and we're not a credit card company. That's important. I just wanted to state those little pieces before we go on. What we recognize that it's utterly important is how we manage and how responsible we are as the scale of electronic payments grows, and Visa has a role within it. So we know that any time immediate access to money and to credit is a great advantage, but we also know it comes with huge risks. And we know that the public expects us to act up, and so we have. One of the great things about the internet is that it has helped stimulate business, stimulate commerce. One of the horrible things about the internet is that it also has helped to stimulate the commercial exploitation of online child abuse. And it's an unintended consequence of the prevalence of cards and the ability to buy and sell and trade online. Now, what is really interesting about this problem, and it goes back to some of the things we were talking about this morning, is Visa's rules are absolutely clear. Nothing can be bought or sold on a Visa card that is illegal in either the buyer's or the seller's jurisdiction. Very clear rule. The problem, of course, comes when there isn't clarity about what is legal in the buyer's or the seller's jurisdiction, or indeed when there is a discrepancy between the law, between the buyer and the seller's jurisdiction. That makes it difficult for us to act in many cases. When it came to child abuse, we were unequivocal. We all agreed, and our members agreed, that this was not something that we were going to allow on our cards. So in 2002, we actually took the step to actually write a rule around child abuse and to prevent our system from allowing commercial trading of child abuse. That's been a very effective policy, and in fact today, while we monitor the web 24/7, we know that there are no child abuse sites today that accept and that where you can actually trade using a Visa card. So for some extent, that has been fantastic. What of course has happened is that that has driven the trade to other less regulated payment systems. And so in recognition of that, in 2004, we decided that we actually wanted to put our money where our mouth was, and actually also our time, into helping CEOP, the Center for Child Exploitation and Online Protection, because we wanted to make sure that we were getting and helping to get to the source of the problem. So we had basically agreed to be a founding partner of CEOP 3 years ago, and that was based on some funding, but particularly funding for the financial investigation desk, because one of the things that the CEOP team needed to get to grips with was how to follow the money, and that was something that Visa was an expert in. So we were able to help develop skills, develop investigation techniques, also put CEOP in touch with our members and banks in order to develop that expertise area. And today, in fact, following the money is an extremely effective way of finding the source of the criminals. I'm very happy to announce today also that we have just confirmed our ongoing commitment to CEOP. And we have actually identified 2 additional projects that we will be working on. One is a project around volunteering. We're going to get our people to go and help and support the Think You Know program and go into schools and actually help provide more education, more awareness raising. And we're also going to be helping specifically a piece of law enforcement work which is around targeting Southeastern European countries and their law enforcement agencies to help them deal with some of the issues today where we know they're a huge source of some of this material, some of these criminals, some of this activity. We're helping law enforcement there to do that, to tackle that. But what I really wanted to talk to you about today is the work that we've been doing together, and Gabrielle's been an absolute leading force in this, in the European Financial Coalition. Because the European Financial Coalition is our attempt to take what CEOP does and replicate it around Europe, because we know that we cannot just fight this problem within one jurisdiction. And to do that, what we've recognized is there is actually no framework. We were talking again this morning about the lack of international legal framework. There is also no legal framework today that allows us to cooperate in an effective way and share best practice and ensure that law enforcement are hooked up together. So we have raised this issue with the European Commission, and the European Commission have, in fact, provided some funding for us to bring together the coalition. The coalition brings together in fact, Gabrielle, I'm going to ask you to kind of talk a little bit about it, because Gabrielle is the person who's been pulling all of this together. And I'll ask her to talk a little bit more about that. But the European Financial Coalition is really the piece, I think, that is going to take this to the next stage. We've made great strides. We launched it in March this year. It is a very good first step, but it is not an easy thing to do. It is extremely difficult, and Gabrielle will talk a little bit more about that. I think the lessons that we're learning as we're going along can well be applied to some of the discussions we were having this morning. So let me hand over to Gabrielle.
Great. Thank you, Daphne. And I'd just like to say that CEOP's partnership with Visa Europe, right from the start, exemplifies the only way, I think, that the fight against child abuse can be successful. It requires partnership and holistic working together. I think the European Financial Coalition, as Daphne said, is a really good example of this. It was launched in March of this year, and some of you I think were at that launch or may have heard about it. And one of the quotes that Jim Gamble, our CEO of CEOP, said is, "The power of the European Financial Coalition lies in the brands behind it." It's the unique partnership collaboration, and we have some powerful brands, powerful organisations who are behind it. It's led by CEOP. CEOP chairs it. We have members of Visa Europe, MasterCard, PayPal, the Italian National Postal and Communication Police, Europol, Microsoft, InHope, and we have advisory members, the Allen Overy International Law Firm, and ICMEC, the International Centre for Missing and Exploited Children. So if we just pause and reflect on that and think of all these organisations who individually are doing really good work within their own spheres to combat commercial sale and distribution of child abuse images, but what we said to the European Commission who are funding this, we said the power and the difference is in this initiative is the unique partnership collaboration, and that's why it will be successful. So what's the objectives of the EFC, the European Financial Coalition? First and foremost, it's to identify, locate and safeguard the victims. Behind every image that is bought and sold and traded on the internet and for every payment system that's misused for this lies a victim, lies a child, and this is the key reason why this has been set up. Another key objective is to identify, arrest the offenders, those who trade in these images or who profit from them. Importantly as well, we want to seize their assets, follow the money, as Daphne said, of the offenders. Because what we're finding is the offenders behind this, the profit that motivates. We also want to raise awareness around the general public, not only on a local level, but on a European level. And by doing that, I think we'll achieve those aims. So what will the activities of the European Financial Coalition cover? Some of the activities will include setting up a steering group, and that steering group has already been established, it's working very well, and that comprises the organisations previously mentioned. We're going to gather intelligence, and I think this is the key point. It's been raised not only now, but in previous speeches this morning. We've got to find strategically what we know and what we don't know. We know that child abuse images exist. We know that it's a highly profitable, relatively low risk activity, but we don't know where these are, how they operate. They change. The modus operandi, and that's why using the intelligence gathering and to identify these gaps, we can more effectively combat them. The European Commission has been key partners, key funding partners for this. The EFC will be a 14-month project, and following the successful completion of the activities, we gather there'll be funding for a further 3 years. So this is a key activity and one that's a long-term one as well. And I think we'll end there. Now, when we were preparing this presentation, Stephen very helpfully set out a couple of questions, and I think that we had for this. For example, what do you feel have been some of the key challenges that we've faced as we try and work together to provide a safer online experience for children? And I think in our experience, both from the EFC and both CEOP as well, one of the major challenges has been getting all the stakeholders to understand the issue itself. What we've found is there's been a lot of focus, perhaps too much, on the products or the outcomes of this, such as the content and the concentration on the technology and the use of technology or misuse. This is really important, but we should not overlook the underlying behaviours and attitude that drives this. The products are the way these behaviours manifest themselves, but only by challenging those behaviours, recognising them, getting all stakeholders to know what motivates these behaviours, can we be truly effective. Another challenge is the lack of universal consensus on the way forward. I think we all recognise this in our various organisations. Everyone's got great ideas. There's a lot of products out there, there's a lot of good advice, sometimes too much, and I think establishing consensus is absolutely vital. What further work in this area have you identified which needs to be done, especially in the light of new and emerging technologies and global usage? I think that in our experience, further work includes getting international oversight and consistency in policy making in the international arena. Very easily said, I think it's somewhat less easily achieved. At the moment, far too many differences and gaps exist. In terms of an international forum, I think using established bodies and established mechanisms such as the United Nations presents a good way forward. And I think this is something that's mentioned earlier. What are the key success criteria in developing child protection and programs which we can then transfer across to other areas, such to do with online safety, such as privacy, protection, education, freedom of speech, for example? And I think as evidenced by the partnership between CEOP and Visa Europe and our speech here today, partnership between key stakeholders really is the way forward. It's absolutely vital to ensuring success. If we ensure this holistic approach, education and empowerment, they're all key success measures which can be transferred across. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gabby. Let's show our appreciation. But as I say, before we go on to the next presentation, let's just see, have we got one or two kind of provocative questions? We've heard a very exciting start, only started in March, April, May, June, 4 months in, 3 months in. A good focus on partnership, a real desire to build this model across Europe. But what questions have people got now? What could we ask our delegates here now from the floor? Any other questions on the floor? At the back, yep.
I mean, someone mentioned, you mentioned that if people aren't using Visa cards, they're using another card. Obviously, that's being funded by some banking mechanism. So what's stopping that?
Thanks. Was it on? Yes, it is on. Actually, there are quite a lot of online kind of trading sites like eGold and types like that, where, in fact, the whole premise of that business is you load funds, and then the funds disappear and we can no longer trace them. So we are working with law enforcement to ensure that those trading sites and kind of gold trading type sites or barter sites are put through to the scrutiny. But obviously, unless they are deemed to be operating illegally, then our banks' hands are quite tied. So it is difficult to stop this altogether. And actually what we're finding is also that these criminals are extremely inventive in terms of turning value into currency but chasing it around the system. So yeah, we are looking at that, and we're trying to see how we can help entities like the CIA, FBI, etc., Interpol, kind of track and figure out how can they stop this. But as I say, they keep coming up with lots of different inventive ways of exchanging value.
Happy? Good. Any more questions, and then we'll move. Yes, Tony, at the front here.
Just intrigued that there's a bit of a clash between what you just described and the message we were getting in the early session this morning about the need for privacy. And it's going to be an interesting tension to see how you resolve that going forward. How do we keep the privacy whilst being able to track those sorts of assets?
Actually, thank you for raising that issue, because that is the balance that Visa finds itself often in or the debate that we find ourselves in the middle of. On the one hand, we have people who very much like to keep anonymity in terms of trading, buying goods and services. On the other hand, there's an expectation that we bring a level of scrutiny and traceability into everything that is done on Visa cards, because the assumption is that because it's an electronic mechanism, it is possible to do that, and we obviously need to find a balance between those two. So thank you for pointing that out. It is difficulty.
Okay, thanks so much. That was a good start. Let's move on to Aidan. Aidan's going to come and talk to us, as we said earlier, about his experience of creating a sort of safer mobile internet space for children.
Stephen, is the presentation?
Yes. Can you just toggle Aidan's presentation?
Just make sure it starts right. Oh, it's on here.
Is it? You've got it. This one. Great. We got it.
I want to start not in talking about TiVo, which is not yet a commercial offering, but will be in the autumn. I'll use this, actually, it's fine. I think we haven't spoken much about the context of the children we're talking about. It's been a very sobering, frightening session even. But I'd like to just go back and give you a bit more of the context of what teenagers think and how they approach their education and what they need. Because I think if we're too alarmed, there's a danger of running down the wrong route in being too locked down and too safe, which isn't really what is going to work for many children today. I highly recommend this book, What's the Point of School, by Guy Claxton, which takes a very refreshing, very intelligent look at what children really need to prepare them for what is quite a difficult world they come into today, where the expectations of what they'll be doing are very unsure. And we present that as adults as this wonderful world where they don't know what jobs they'll be doing in 10 years' time. Maybe it's frightening for them to not know what jobs they'll be doing or what jobs will be there for them when they come out of school or college. A world where we all have portfolio lifestyles, where we do 5, 6, 10 different things in the course of our adult lives. It's wonderful to think that's a great ambition and how wonderful that is. But actually, if you're an average child or a below average child, maybe that's not so great. Again, we talk about technically brilliant kids and how wonderful they all are at using technology. Well, some of them aren't. A third of them probably are very good, a third are quite good, but the other third are nowhere. And they kind of get ignored, and we don't remember who we're talking about. So I'd just like to read a very short section here from Guy Claxton's book. It says, learning real, difficult, meaningful things in collaboration with others, with some responsibility for determining how they go about it, that's exactly what young people themselves say they want. The evidence from Cambridge professor Joan Ruddock and others is that by the time they get to secondary school, if not well before, most of them are hungry for the 3 R's: responsibility, respect, and real. And the 3 C's: choice, challenge, and collaboration. So we're talking here about concepts that aren't really embedded in the curriculum at all for many secondary school pupils. So I've automatically, by using my foot in some strange manner, turned over the slide in a way I'm not quite sure how. But the second thing I wanted to read before I get on to talking about Thibault is a rather wonderful quote from Stephen Fry at the section for Digital Security and Safety in this week's published Digital Britain report. I think it's a much more sophisticated, better analogy of the world that children find themselves in than the discussions that I've heard before about where you can drown in a swimming pool, but we still teach kids to swim. It reads, "We've always had the ability to create structures that are quite bewildering to us. A good example is a city. I'd say that the internet's more like a city than anything else. In cities there are slums, there are palaces of wisdom, libraries, museums, art galleries, theatres, places of entertainment and shops. And there are places in those cities where you wouldn't go, down dark alleys, let alone have your children do so. But slowly we let our children learn to use the cities as we do." An example of my son earlier this year, he started at secondary school. At 11, he suddenly had to catch the tube by himself, make 2 changes, and go on a 45-minute journey. This is a year after I was frightening him even walking to school a mile. And yet now he flourishes from the freedoms that he's given and the independence, and I occasionally meet him somewhere else in London. We pre-arrange a time to meet and he makes his own way there. This is what we're talking about with Thibault. It's not locking things down, it's making it safer, it's making it something that is age classification related, and we've been working with the British Board of Film Classification, the BBFC and others. But what's taken us so long, and I think we're not afraid of it having taken us so long because we've had several years' experience previously as Stelges in mobile learning, is actually aggregating all of the different technologies and filters so we come up with something that's useful. Because the worst thing is to have a filtering system that restricts you so much that everyone circumvents it. And actually lots of children are extremely good at circumventing filters and safety systems. So this provides unlimited mobile internet access with appropriate age-related filters and structures, and what we hope is a reasonably robust sign-on system and age verification process through the original user, whether that's a school or a parent. The debate we've already discussed, there's quite a lot of different views. I was part of the eSafety and Web 2 discussions that were Bector funded but run by Mike Sharples at Nottingham University. And here on the screen you'll see the policy positions that were produced by that group of 20 or 30 or so experts. I'm not sure we were all experts, we were interested bodies rather than experts. So on top left you've got the walled garden approach where you restrict access to something that's completely safe. Bottom right, open access, and then somewhere in between there's other positions. What was really surprising to me in that session was the directors of children's services were there, and there were several of them. No one advocated lockdown as an option at all. First of all, it's unrealistic and unenforceable, and completely safe is never something you can promise. And secondly, it's not something that's really desirable. To empower and manage children, their teachers, their parents, and everyone else who has an interest in their safety, to let them use the internet creatively and appropriately is something different, and it's something we all applaud. It's a hard job, but it's what we came down as a sort of consensus of the majority opinion. So what Thibault does is to apply this notion, and it's also written in quite a lot of the recommendations of the Byron report, is to follow through on this idea of having simple age and stage related filters and content blocks. So what this enables us to do, and following up one of the comments this morning, is a parent will be able to buy something, a computer with 3G connectivity or mobile internet connectivity straight from a retailer, and out of the box, in the cloud, not on the machine itself, it has these age-related content filters and appropriate guidance for parents. It doesn't just relate to simple internet content, it also relates to gaming, to films, to social networking sites, and Facebook will be open to those over 12. YouTube will be open to those over 12, because we know that's what children want to use. We know it's not completely safe, and we're trying to do as best a job we can as make it appropriate for that age of child. So in amongst this world, we're also very well aware that every child has different needs, and yet the gaming world, for example, is getting very sophisticated. There's a conversation just in the break this morning. I mean, within a year or two, games may cross over with films, and we were talking about the difficulty then of applying two different age classification systems, the BBFC system to films and something else for gaming. And this is going to be one of the challenges. How do we decide what's appropriate? And we already know that some parents seem to be really not very concerned about 18 classification games, where they really would be about 18 classification films. But we already know from Tanya Byron's work and from other work going on that actually some 18 classification games really are, to some children, quite troubling, whilst to others they manage to filter out the things that we would find difficult, and they take it in the context of the rest of their lives. So what I think we're also conscious of is that not all parents are good at making these decisions themselves. So all we're trying to do in the complex world that is the appropriate world for the future is provide one of the solutions. We know it's not the only solution or the solution, but it makes it easy for parents to be reasonably confident that their children are doing the right kind of things on the internet, are using it in the right kind of way. And if they have 3 or 4 children of different ages, there are different sign-ons and permissions for each child. It's possible for the same system to be used in schools, but we anticipate when we start making this commercial in the autumn that it's primarily going to be a retail product.
Thank you so much. You just were answering at the end there a question that I had in my mind about take-up. I remember when Microsoft launched Vista, and they had a very sophisticated level of family settings. And I was at a presentation that Microsoft was saying that only 11% of all the users of their software browser product were actually using the system. And so the question I was going to ask you is, well, what's the take-up? But as you heard at the end there, this is just something that you're still working to launch. It's not quite ready on the market yet, is it?
Yeah, we're testing it in several parts of the country, and we're in discussion with some very large retailers, and we're hoping it might be available as part of the Universal Home Access scheme through some of those retailers.
Okay, well, that's great then. Let's just take a couple of questions from the floor about the process that you've gone through and this ability to sort of match ages and stages with the different content that's independently verified. Any questions from the floor? Yes, just on the table number 2. There's 2 questions there, both of you. Let's have both questions at the same time, then we can give Aidan a chance to think. Your question first.
Sounds good. All right. I guess I was wondering, how is this classification determined? I mean, there are so many new websites, pages within websites and everything else that are coming out. Is it based on words? Is it based on images? I guess how is that classified? And then a website that hasn't, I guess, properly been classified yet, are they just denied access to it, or is it kind of given a high rating so they can't kind of stumble upon?
For a fuller technical answer, I'll refer you to a colleague Phil who's on the front table, but the simple answer, my sort of lay answer to you, if you want more then please talk to Phil afterwards, is that there are a number of different processes and stages. It's most of those things you've just mentioned combined. It doesn't aim to use any one and to be successful. So, for example, for porn sites, there are certain patterns around those sites and connections to other sites which make it obvious what they are very quickly, and it's possible to exclude them, in a very fast manner. There are other things that pose as a legitimate site, and in fact may even be a legitimate site for a period of time and then suddenly change identity. And obviously there are different policies and procedures for that. Again, social networking sites, there are particular technologies and processes and people involved, and mediation in checking those social networking sites. And so I think the trick with TiVo is laying all of those things on top of each other and aggregating them. For a more technical answer, I'm afraid I'm not the right person, and I'd refer you to Phil.
Phil, can you just show yourself? There we are. Afterwards, at the break, let's have a discussion between those 2 tables. Carol, I think you had a question as well.
Yes, I'd like to know how, or if you envisage this fitting together with a single sign-on of virtual learning environments. All the children now are obviously using virtual learning environments. We're doing all the county training and everything to get that in place. So the idea is they sign on once for everything on the internet, and this is another single sign-on. So. Yeah.
It's a very good question. I mean, obviously it's one we've been thinking about. I can't give you a simple answer, except to say that NetSweeper, which is used by about 50% of local authorities as their broadband filtering system, is included within TiVo. So in theory, for 50% of local authorities in time, it will be possible to have a consistent sign-on across broadband and mobile internet. But there's many different hurdles and bureaucratic problems before that happens. I think from the user's point of view, that's the nirvana. certainly through education, of having a system that's consistent at home and at school or when you're mobile. But there are many, many different hurdles to making that easy.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there because we've got one last presentation before we hand over to the second session this afternoon. Aidan, thank you so much. Let's show our appreciation to Aidan. Thank you very much, Aidan. And our last panellist in this crammed 45-minute session is Simon Sawston, who is the Public Affairs Manager at ELSPA. And I know that just this week, on Tuesday, was it, Simon? Yes. The DCMS announced that the preferred classification for games in the UK would be PEGI. So I know that you're going to mention and talk a little bit about that, and also the work that the association is doing after the Byron recommendations to make sure that the games environment that children play is safer. Thanks, Simon.
Absolutely. Bear with me while I get my slides up. Up on the desktop. Oh, here we go. Yeah. Sorry, I've got a different version. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. You can all hear me okay? Okay, good. As Stephen said, I'm Simon Sawston. I'm from the Entertainment and Leisure Software Publishers Association, ELSPA, and I'm going to be talking very quickly about the Byron review, the recommendations for video games, and where we are with those. I've not got very long, so I'll rattle through these and hopefully have time for a couple of questions. In short, the recommendations from the Byron Review, Safer Children in a Digital World, can be summed up in the following areas, really. Voluntary codes of practice to address things like takedown of offensive material. That includes user-generated content, particularly we're talking there in terms of cyberbullying, comments made and posted by others. Age verification systems. Essentially, we're talking about access to content there, and that hinges upon, in the first instance, age classification of content. Without that, you can't very well put in place a practical age verification system. And to improve the continuity and usability of parental controls, which are built into video games consoles that are familiar to all, I'm sure, Microsoft Xbox, Nintendo Wii, PlayStation, and also into some software, like, for example, Windows Vista, which was mentioned earlier on. The Byron Review found that awareness of video game age classification systems and of e-safety in general was relatively low, and asked us to address that and to raise awareness levels. Advertising, essentially the recommendation was that advertising should be, rules on advertising of age-rated content and display of the age rating should be consistent and clear. And again, the ASA consultation, which was mentioned earlier on today, includes specific proposals for that, which I'll mention again in a moment. Finally, a review of the age classification system itself. Professor Byron, I should say now, determined as a result of her research that the current video games age classification system was not clear and was confusing for children and for parents, and should be altered to add clarity. Okay, so we welcomed the review. We thought it was a very, very fair, very balanced review, and raised some very interesting questions. The first thing that we did was to establish industry working groups looking at the specific recommendations. And we uncovered some interesting things. I mean, in retail and retail, for example, first thing to do was to put in place a survey of what measures are in place in the retail environment, not just retail, but also e-tail, which of course is an increasing part of the business now, the sales process now. As you might expect, the actual measures in place in retail vary according to from company to company and depending on the size of the operation too. Advertising, I mentioned, a review was carried out which found that actually video games advertising was 99% compliant with the current CAP and BCAP codes, which was heartening for us, obviously. Moving on to online security issues, I mentioned age verification. It presents its own difficulties. Essentially, it's not only is it a technical challenge, but also it's a challenge in terms of attitudes out there as well. Time was when it was considered that essentially, if it was necessary to use a credit card, for example, to pay online, that could be taken as evidence enough that the purchaser was 18. Well, of course, that's not the case. I understand that, for example, in debit cards, for example, can be purchased from, can be obtained from around age 11, 12, and there are various other means also of buying online. Education was a central theme running through all of our work. Essentially, none of the systems in place have much relevance or work particularly well unless consumers are aware that they're there and unless the industry and retailers are aware of the systems that are there for them to use and how they work and why they're important. What we did as a first, in the first instance, was to get some basic literature put together, leaflets which were handed out to the London Games Festival, sent to retailers, made available online, explaining why age ratings are there, why they're important, how they work, explaining for confused parents how to set parental controls, for example, on your children's PlayStation. We also linked up with CEOP on Safer Internet Day 2009 and produced some best practice guidance there. None of it rocket science, but again, education is the key. It's a case of getting the message out there, no matter how simple it is. Also, with the arrival of UKIS, the UK Council for Child Internet Safety, we have begun working with them on taking a lot of these issues forward. We're glad to be involved with UKIS. It comprises a very broad range of relevant stakeholders, and we're all going to have to work together to face these challenges. I think there are very few of the challenges that can be addressed by one sector on its own, and that's one of the challenges of the digital world, I think. Feeding into the BCAP consultation, which I mentioned, which I believe closes today, and the review of the age classification system, the DCMS ran a consultation on this over the summer last year, ended in November, which we fed into, and as Stephen said a couple of minutes ago, the announcement on Tuesday from DCMS was that in the UK, the Pan-European Game Information System, the PEGI system, would become the single UK video games classification system and backed in law, which we think is very good news, very positive for consumers and for child safety. So the ongoing challenges. Access to content. I mean, I've talked about age classification and age verification and what the issues are there. What's coming out of the discussions with UKIS is that it requires a joint approach. Cross-sector working is required and cooperation. Those kinds of measures, I think, can work and can go a long way towards addressing child safety issues if there's cooperation among the video games sector, hardware manufacturers, whether they be games consoles or PCs, ISPs, there's a lot of work to be done. Some of it is complex, but above all, as I said, it needs cooperation. Byron mentioned content, contact, and conduct. Again, I think education is the key. Ed Mayo said earlier on today about the risks of consumer backlash. This is something that's come out of our discussions around age verification measures. It's fine to say to a child or a teenager wishing to purchase a product online, a video game or a subscription to a video game, that they need to verify their age and obtain verification from a parent or guardian. How does that work? Does the parent or guardian then receive an email asking for verification? Does the email get dealt with? Is the email resented as an intrusion, unsolicited mail? These kinds of issues I don't think are insurmountable, but they need to be worked through. We need children to understand what's sensible and safe. Do parents treat online engagement in the same way they treat real life interaction? You know, if your child is playing online and with regular buddies online, that's fine. But parents need to treat that in the same way as if they're playing with regular friends a couple of streets away. Know who the friends are, know what games they're playing and whereabouts they are, what's actually going on, what kind of contact is taking place. The children need to be aware of this too. They need. Oh, sorry, I misunderstood. Okay, well, I'll be quick in that case. So they need to understand why ratings are important, why not all games are for children. You know, the average video games player in the UK is now 33 years old. There's a large, relatively wealthy market there, which the games publishers cater for. But some of those products aren't necessarily suitable for children. That's why we need ratings, and online, why we need measures like age verification. The infamous Wild West, I mean, it's been mentioned earlier on, but children are growing up in this environment. I think they need to engage with it. They need to grow up. They need some understanding of what's out there, but they need to understand how to deal with it, how to be safe, how their conduct affects others. I think we're moving to a world now where parents and teachers are going to be increasingly savvy about the online space, which is great news. It can only go to provide a sound footing for our work and the work of UKIS, but there's still much to be done. Thank you.
Simon, thank you so much. Sorry to rush you at the end then. Come and sit down. Any questions before we close this session, specifically on games for Simon? Anybody got questions about Peggy or the way that the games blur between films and games may take place? Who's got a question here? Did I see a couple of hands at the back there first? Let's go for that, then that, then that. Good, quite a few here. Speak loud, stand up if you could, we can hear you then.
I would like to ask if there is any reason why the decision has taken that long before you reached the conclusion that this is PEGI, the preferred system. I thought there was a timetable and some urgency there, if there is any explanation. And my second question is the following. You referred to education. Yeah? I wonder, rating contains considerations pertaining to quality of the game, or it is only about violence, the wording, etc. In other words, quality and content is part of the rating. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the first part of the question, your first question was about why it has been announced just this week that PEGI is the preferred system. It was a government consultation which followed up Professor Byron's initial report. So essentially the consultation process began in March last year, and quite literally the government have concluded their consultation and their deliberations and made the announcement this week. So in terms of the time scale, I mean, it's essentially been down to the government. It has taken a long time, I agree with you. I think perhaps we would have liked it to be quicker, but really we're happy that all the evidence was considered and that the government has made the right decision in this case. Secondly, in terms of how ratings work, the PEGI system involves initially considering the video game content from a very basic standpoint with basic questions. Does the game contain violence to any degree? Does it contain any offensive language? Does it contain anything likely to frighten people? These questions are then followed up with a further, more detailed examination. If there's violence, what kind of violence is it? Is it cartoonish violence, as you might expect to see in a Tom and Jerry cartoon, or is it more realistic violence, as you might expect to see in a close World War II combat simulation? The same with language and with frightening imagery. Is it frightening perhaps to a 7-year-old, a ghost jumping out onto the screen, or is it liable to be frightening to anybody playing the video game?
Thank you, Simon. I am actually going to have to curtail the other questions. I know there's a couple of other hands there, but the invitation is to talk to Simon afterwards in the break, because out of courtesy to the next set of speakers, we're trying to cram a lot in this afternoon. I want us to close this session by, can we just show our appreciation again to Gabrielle, Aidan, Simon and Daphne. Thank you so much. Well,